Good evening. I'm Philip J. Brutus. Once again, welcome to Connections. As you know, here at Connection, we connect you to the world. We're all the same. We have that fine thread that runs through our veins, makes us human beings. That's what we try to do here to connect you. Wherever you're from, whatever your color, your race, your nationality, we connect you. And we do that usually with a panel of experts. And tonight we have such expert to talk about a very important issue we touched on last week, which is dumping, waste management, pollution, environmental pollution, you name it. And without further ado, let's introduce you to Mr. LaSalle Sweetland of the LeSpank Company. Good evening, Mr. Sweetland.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Gomez, since Mr. Sweetland is your guest, perhaps you can lead us into the discussion with you.
I will. As you recall, last week we discussed the Basel Convention and the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste. And we touched on how this is affecting lesser developed nations, in particular nations in Africa and in the Caribbean, including the incident that we described, which may have been the index case, when movement of processed ash ended up on Haitian beaches and then in the sea near off of Haiti. And so we have Mr. LaSalle here to comment on what can be offered to these countries in terms of assistance and how the implementation of these hazardous waste management processes are actually accomplished.
Okay. One of the key aspects of the convention was that where the medical waste was actually created should be where it's actually treated. The problems that the Caribbean countries or underdeveloped countries have is developing a process for the waste, separating the waste, and treating it. And so that's become very cost inhibited. So what they've done is resulted in the transport, and that's resulted in the developed countries sending it to the underdeveloped countries. I mean, there are solutions out there that entail anything from microwaving the waste to autoclaving it, which is basically an oven aspect where they bake it to the point where the chemical aspects of it breaks down, then they grind it, and then the waste could actually be disposed of as normal.
Now, you and I had an opportunity to talk before the show, and I think one of the things that we discussed when we were talking about the convention earlier in the week was the fact that the underdeveloped countries have a greater challenge of developing their own system of processing and disposing of hazardous or toxic material. In particular, I think in particular health, toxic and hazardous material from the health industry. Is that accurate?
I think it's accurate to say health industry is one of the significant contributors, but I think that the variety of problems, and I think Mr. LaSalle commented earlier as well, that a good amount of this has to do with metals and processed metals. We might speak to that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good amount of it is processed metal, but the key aspects of the disposing of the waste is a medical aspect of as well. One of the biggest core points now that's coming in the industry, the medical industry now, is pharmaceutical waste. And you talk about pharmaceutical waste, you talk about a lot of us are in our 40s, we may have mercury in our teeth. When we go back to the dentist, they have to remove that. Now that becomes pharmaceutical waste that needs to be disposed of. Now, in the older days, they would just throw that into the trash, and they can't do that anymore. So as regulation becomes more intensified, you're seeing more and more items that normally were not classified under that are now becoming classified under that.
I'm wondering, are you familiar with the incidents at Minamata Bay?
No.
Minamata Bay is a bay in Japan that in the Far East that was polluted with mercury waste. And the way that was revealed was children started developing illnesses, related neurologic problems and all sorts of other complications.
Now let's talk about the Basel Convention. We talked about it the other day and we didn't fully, I think, address it. Does it have any provision for criminal charges from meted out against countries that pollute the waters of poor countries or the signatories to this convention, what recourse do they have if they're faced with this situation where the country is being dumped on by bigger countries or richer countries?
Well, the outcome of the convention is basically you are, it's more of a gentleman's agreement. I mean, there's really no teeth to the convention that could mandate any kind of regulation if you catch another country dumping off your waters. And that's
right,
one
as
of the
I understand
issues.
it, it's a criminal offense according to the convention, but there's no enforceability. There's no entity to enforce it.
To enforce it.
But it seems to me that a country should be able to file a lawsuit in the World Court or some other tribunals that hear international disputes.
I imagine that that's the case, but it's unprecedented at this point because the convention, it's really just started like taking off or come into a place where it's even being recognized.
But there have been lawsuits. We talked about the, what was the town that Dr. Gomez, in New York, where they had major dumping.
Oh yeah, Love
for-
Canal. Love Canal.
Love Canal.
We spoke a lot about Love Canal. And,
Perhaps we haven't had an international aspect to it where one country would sue the other country for doing something. So that's probably where you probably right down that this is new.
Yeah.
But there's been lawsuits for dumping, polluting, and everything like that. Now, on your card, you say you do green partners, MediClean distribution. What is that? How do you
MedClean is one of the autoclave solutions that I talked about earlier. I mean, it's an autoclave solution in that it could be a mobile system or it could be a fixed system. Basically, an autoclave is just a large oven. So it bakes the medical waste, then it grinds it down and creates it into dust. So the MedClean system is for that.
Well, a lot of poor countries got a lot of waste in Africa and the Caribbean. I mean, you see waste all over the place. There have been several, I guess, technologies developed to take the waste and turn it into energy. And does that energy leave any residue that can pollute the air? For example, emissions that come out from burning the actual waste.
Well, what you're finding now in the industry, there's a big drawback from incinerators. If you look at the amount of incinerators that were actually active compared to what's currently being burned now, one of the biggest soot is the soot or the pollution that comes out of the air from the incinerators. So actually the federal government, the United States federal government has actually had a mandate to put more regulation on incinerators. So what you're finding is hospitals or other organizations are pulling away from that because there's so much regulation stemmed from that they have to find other alternatives to disposing of the medical waste.
Now, let's explain for the sake of the audience that there are various pressures here, economic pressures, and one of the major economic pressures is that poor countries want to get the contracts to dispose of the waste, whether or not they're prepared to handle it or whether or not it leverages their future and their potential health effects down the line. They need the money. Guinea-Bissau just, at one point, accepted something like $600 million for transport of one particular movement of hazardous waste, and that's 4 times their GNP. That's the kind of money that the country can't turn down.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the repercussions of that, it leads to the point where unless you have an entity like the Basel Convention, you're not going to have responsible behavior of these the country's leaders on behalf of their nation and their future.
And that's one of the main issues with the underdeveloped countries. They're accepting the waste, but they don't have a system in place to handle the disposal of it or recycle of it.
And I want to ask you about that because what your focus, based on what we talked about, is you go into these underdeveloped countries and you teach them how to use or have their own system. In fact, how to put their own system in place and how to actually make it profitable.
That's correct. I mean, one of the solutions is training and education, and having the technology available for them to treat that waste. And that's what we do.
Let's talk about arsenic. I remember there was under President Clinton, there was a rule or some kind of order that you need to have a certain level of arsenic in the water. And after President Bush came into power, he removed the limits, and arsenic in water started to go up. Do you see that in, I hate to say underdeveloped countries, I could say less advanced countries. I think that's the term we use now.
All these things, yeah.
I can't keep up.
It is. It's less developed countries.
I
That's
can't
all.
Less
keep
developed
up.
countries.
Less developed
Yeah,
countries.
yeah.
Because everybody's developed to some degree.
One of those problems is the regulation. I mean, in less developed countries, I mean, there's less regulation. So a lot of things happen that are not put in the public view, or it goes underneath the table. So currently there's no regulation that could track the amount of things that are going into the environment that's affecting our people.
Now, there's been a story where a lot of birds have been found dead, dropping. All of the fishes are dying, and their brains exploding, their hearts exploding. Is there a correlation, do you think? I mean, I suppose there might be, because pollution is dangerous.
Yeah, for me to comment, that would be a speculation. I think if you look at the news reports that are coming out, I mean, everyone's speculating on why that's happening. But I mean, common sense would tell you something's happening in the environment. Something's exposing these birds to the environment. If you look at the food chain, and I mean, they would be the ones that are affected first. The same issue with the fishes, the one species of fish that died, and similar standards. So the environment is being affected. So if you look at that's what's happening in the continental United States, can you imagine what's happening in less developed countries as well?
Yes. Well, Mr. Sweetland, thank you for coming. We hope you'll visit us again, because this issue is not going to go away.
Definitely.
And I'm sure we're going to have more shows on that. Again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
See you around. Thanks. You're watching Connections. We'll be right back.